So we are definitely in the battle for our survival in Honduras. And I would say it's a critical moment not only for us, but I think for all projects because of the repercussions that this might have in our industry. I think the outcome of what we're fighting for truly can impact us positively or negatively, and in my perspective, maybe for a while. Though I like Tito's perspective that we are winning in the long run, some setbacks can be expected in the short term. So we have definitely been targeted by the Honduran administration, by the current Honduran administration. The ZEDEs, the type of zone we operate under, have been a target and a very convenient political objective that serves to distract from their political failures across the last 3 years of their administration. But their motivation, the politicians, it's much more than just attacking those of us that have created these zones. It's really about the power of the purse, status, and power retention over the long term. And unfortunately, we are obstacles in that pathway, primarily because it's much better to be an authoritarian with no strong competition inside your own country from a foreign company than it is to have a strong foreign company running a private city that can showcase how poorly you are doing things inside of your country. And has been explained already by Titus and Massimo, the Supreme Court ruled the enabling jurisdictions to be unconstitutional retroactively, which is illegal under all perspectives except in a politicized Supreme Court. And this is in spite of 3 previous rulings or 4 previous rulings. At this point, I've lost track that state that the zones are constitutional. Now, what this means for Honduras goes way beyond what it means specifically for our zones. There are multiple articles now being written about the pathway that this country is down, what happens to it economically, what happens to it in terms of opportunities for its people. Droves of people are leaving Honduras for the U.S. while the U.S. is still open. And of course, there's the impact, the net negative impact of eliminating the zones in Honduras, which have been described by scholars as having a very positive impact if they were allowed to exist. Of course, this also weakens the arbitration case that Próspera has against Honduras in the World Bank Arbitration Center for $10.7 billion. In a way, it makes it almost an assured win, which is not what we want. What we want is to be able to execute this project and to prove through voluntarism that you can help people become prosperous and really solve the world's most important problems. So lawfare is now a very common thing around the world, unfortunately. And the government in Honduras is using it very strongly. They are using it to target their political oppositions as they seek to continue to hold on to power through one or more presidential terms. And we, the ZEDEs, as I was saying earlier, are an obstacle along the way, but also a tool, because as Massimo alluded to, this allows them to target their political opposition who approved these zones in the first place, to the point of calling them traitors to the state, a very serious crime in Honduras. I would want to also add that for the last 3 years, the ZEDEs have been a great political opportunity to distract for every political failure that the government has had. Interestingly, we were approved on December 30th of 2017, but were only able to launch in early 2020. Since early 2020, we operated only 1 year without the staunch political opposition that we have had thus far. And we have taken on that fight frontally. We, rather than other typical multinational corporations that at the first sign of opposition from the government tucks tails and leave, decided to fight through diplomacy and legal action. And we have done both, and proudly so. Yet the piñata continues, and we continue to be collateral damage in a broader power game. Now, in spite of all of this opposition, we are a story of growth in the face of adversity. We have thrived in this very hostile environment. And of course, we could have done much better had we not had this negative rhetoric. But our visitors to Próspera, out of curiosity and out of the desire to create something within the jurisdiction, continues to grow. Even as of August of this year, we have brought investment of over $150 million, even while we were constantly attacked by the government. Over 4,000 jobs have been created, over 265 legal entities, people that have set up companies within the zone to operate out of the zone and take advantage of our legal provisions. And we have had really striking and amazing innovations happening within the zone, primarily in crypto and in biotech. In biotech, we've had 3 companies run their stage 1 clinical trials out of Próspera and bring drugs to market in under a year. It's quite promising. It's very exciting, and under any metric, very successful. The first building that was built under the legal system of Próspera was created, the tallest building in Roatan. A beautiful building. Thank you. For those of you in construction, with a permitting of 24 hours to get it started. We have had the pop-up city Vitalia start in Próspera and successfully conduct a 2-month-long seminar, over 500 participants, all focused on longevity. And now they've established a permanent base in Próspera. But luminaries such as Brian Armstrong from Coinbase, or Brian Johnson, one of the most prominent longevity experts in the world, or Naval Ravikant and Balaji Srinivasan, Magat Wade. You know, Morazan was talking about the blue-collar workers using his zone, and that is fantastic. We both, as a system, bring 2 different perspectives to this, because we want the luminaries to come as well. They drive also jobs and opportunities that are very powerful to the population. So it's wonderful what these zones have done thus far in Honduras. And the world's impressions are very powerful as well. People that are speaking about us, Vitalik from Ethereum, tweeting about preserving the zones and how important they were in the world alongside others. Balaji and Brian, as I stated earlier. And in this road, what we've done is also measure inside of Honduras what the sentiment of population is. I mean, are they really swallowing hook, line, and sinker all of the negative rhetoric the government has been spewing? Well, it turns out that the population is more open than ever to seek opportunities within these zones, proving the fact that once people overcome their initial skepticism, they're open to participating in the zones. And the expectation of the community, of the people of the country, is that the zones would grow and expand over time. Now, this, of course, was before the Supreme Court ruling, so right now there's a bunch of uncertainty in the air. Now, what are the consequences of failure in Honduras? My expectation is that it's an important setback for our efforts as a whole. And the reason is politicians are downstream from public opinion. Politicians who, at the end of the day, need to have a say in the approval of these zones will look at this and think, does this help me win or does it help me lose? Will this project help my political career? And because of the very public nature of how the ZERE situation in Honduras has been going, my sense is that this would be a large setback. But I would not want to leave you with a negative message. And I think there is hope and there is a path forward. And even in the short term, there are two important milestones that are external, one that is external and one that is internal. The first is the US election, where a change in the administration could signal a much stronger support for international investors abroad. And this aligns with the incentives to minimize immigration because of strong job creations locally. So this could be an important factor that could happen as quickly as in a few weeks. And the second more important milestone that needs to happen is the change in governments within Honduras, likely to happen around October of 25. And if everything goes as expected, we could see a change in government in Honduras. Now, this is very difficult. The current administration is focused on controlling all government institutions and using them against their political opponents. So it's very difficult. Now, we are working very strongly to diligently share our story with Honduras and the world of how important these zones are. And we have plans for every contingency, including the worst-case scenario of not being able to operate. One of those plans involves multiple initiatives in other countries. But I have to tell you, and Titus and I were speaking about that this morning, until you have a signed, firm agreement with a government, not a binding MOU, not an LOI, you're only at about 10% probability of your project succeeding. All of the work that happens to get to that binding MOU is critical, but getting to contract, that is when real progress begins to happen, and it's not easy. However, I believe we will persevere. I believe we will succeed. At Próspera, we're extremely determined, and for those of you that are entrepreneurs, we're also optimists. And if we knew what we were getting into before we got into it, maybe we would have never started. But without a doubt, once we're in the midst of it, we persevere, we work through it, we do the grind until we're through on the other side. So that's what you can expect from Próspera. I'm hopeful that we will come to a positive outcome. I'll say a final word about the Supreme Court ruling, which has not been issued yet. There is a possibility that some sort of respect of acquired rights is embedded, primarily because of the difficulty of extracting everything that's already been done from the system. There's a strong incentive to do so, alongside the incentive of the arbitration case. So again, I'm very hopeful, but I also expect a situation that is not positive, and we will persevere. Thank you very much. I have a few minutes for some questions if you want.
Any questions?
Mark?
Maybe someone else. Okay.
I'd love to hear about some of these contingencies. And before we go on, Gabe, I got to say, the Próspera team has been brave and stalwart throughout this. And Duna, I have stayed in Duna, and it is a beautiful, glorious building. It's amazing what you've done there. And you've made Roatan a better place, and you've made Crawfish Rock a better place. So thank you for that. What are these contingencies that you're talking about? How are you going to handle any given situation? So Massimo laid out, our bastard doesn't win, any variety of things that may go on.
Sure. Well, it's one of the interesting things that happens psychologically to human beings is once you take something away from them, suddenly they begin to wonder if they were not better off having it, right? So there's that. And what does that do in practicality? Well, what that does in practicality is that now you have the situation that you have 4,000 jobs in Próspera, a bunch more in Orquídea, which is the other zeta that's not that much talked about here, and a bunch of others that Massimo has created. What do you do with all of that? What do you do with the subdivisions of property that have existed within Próspera already? So if you bought an apartment that's already broken out in the land registry, how do you, if the zones aren't recognized, then how do you recognize that property? So one of the things we're focusing right now is highlighting the complexity of what they ruled on, which they had not previously even thought about. Because the reality is, the politicians, the judges, none of them had ever visited, in spite of invitations over and over and over again to come and check out what it was that we were doing. Now they're starting to deal with the complexity of it. That's probably one of the reasons they haven't issued the ruling in writing, because they're trying to figure out, okay, how do we implement this thing? Now, to the contingencies, one is trying to roll into the CC&Rs, the controlling covenants of the land as a Próspera, in spite of multiple landowners, is all private property, mostly private property. So we can do a lot in terms of rolling into the covenants and restrictions of the property itself, many of the rules that we have inside of the regulatory stack, which was not designed that way in the first place. There are other contingencies that we've planned for that I can't speak to publicly, but I will say that we will do anything and everything possible to make sure that we are able to preserve, and also to preserve what we have in Honduras, but also to leverage what we have to take to other countries. So I know it wasn't very specific, and I'm sorry, but it's not even clear to us yet because the ruling's not out. I think I would be more able to speak to that if I had. Yeah.
Any other questions?
Thanks, Mark.
Hi. You mentioned that the contract is the real commitment such that the work can take place and commence with the free city, right? Do you agree that it is also like a necessary condition to have this international treaty between some Latin American country or African country and like the United States or the European Union, such that you can like strengthen this commitment?
Do you mean the contract between the government and
the free city?
And the free cities?
Exactly. That's the commitment. But
Yes.
the arbitration and all these check and balances, do you think that an international treaty is also a necessary condition to start building?
I think it's a fundamental condition to have that.
Okay.
If you don't have a mechanism to hold to the fire the feet of the politicians, at the end of the day, because of the incentive structure that they're under, they will screw you. No doubt about it. They will screw you. So you have to have something larger and beyond their own jurisdiction in order to, it's a layer of protection in a way. In Honduras, you had multiple layers of protection. You had the constitutional change. You have legal stability agreements with the government and the investors, and you have international treaties. All three are being put to the test right now. But the way they were structured is strong enough that at the very least, the international arbitration that happens because of the treaties likely will be the key to getting to an agreement. So without that, I think the risk is much higher.
One quick question.
One quick question.
I will try. I'm not so much into Honduran politics, so
Yes.
I can
Neither am I, by the
approach
way.
the problem only psychologically. So maybe it's very difficult for the population there to kind of feel what this ZD will look like or what it will be like, because actually I have the same problems.
Yep.
Will it be something for only very rich people, for pharmaceutical companies who make studies on persons very quick, and will it lead to high prices and poverty? Or could you just ask them what they want or what they would desire? Could you make a big conference for the people, not only for the politicians? Psychologically, the politicians don't want that. It's kind of jealousy because you make something better than they do.
Yep.
So could you make a Free Cities conference for the people there and provide healthcare, jobs, and food?
To answer that super quickly in less than a minute, 90% of jobs, and this is not clear, but 90% of jobs are for Hondurans. Most of the jobs are lower level jobs, construction jobs, cleaning jobs, all of these jobs. So it's part of the nature of how the economy works. But the key to what you're talking about is how politicians inject fear into a population versus a vision. And typically fear wins. Thank you all very much. Thank you.